Welcome to the Granny Square Handbag tutorial. I'm Jessica with Stay Cozy Creative Co. and I'm so excited that you've decided to make this project with me. We'll be using a hand crochet technique and my goal was to make this a beginner-friendly project. So let's get started. You'll need 3 skeins of chenille yarn and I'm using 3 different colors, and you'll also need a good pair of scissors. We'll be starting from the center of the granny square, so grab whichever color you want for the middle. And we're going to begin with a simple slip knot. If you're new to hand crochet, this can be a little tricky at times, but it's kind of like tying a one-sided shoelace. And then we're going to chain 2 by pulling your working yarn through that first loop. So each loop that we make in this project, you want it to be around 2 inches wide. And if you get it bigger, then it's going to make your bag probably too loose. And if you make them too small, it'll be hard to reach through those loops. Now to create a circle, we're going to lay that 3rd loop on top of the 1st loop, pull a new loop through, and then secure it with another loop. So that's called a slip stitch. And now we're going to chain 2. Then we're going to double crochet 7 times into the center of that loop. So you might have to move the yarn around a little bit to find the center, but basically that first chain that we made is the circumference of the circle, and you just have to find the middle. Then we're going to do double crochet. So we're going to wrap a loop around our fingers so that there's 2. Reach into the center, pull a new loop through. So then you have 3 on your fingers, and you're going to pull a loop through the first 2 and then pull a loop through those second 2. So that was 1 double crochet. So don't worry if you're new to hand crochet, I'm going to show you this again. You're going to wrap a loop around your fingers so that there's 2. Reach into the center, pull a new loop through so that you have 3 loops on your fingers, and then you're going to pull a new loop through those first 2 and then pull a loop through those second 2. If you've got it, you're going to do this 5 more times so that you have a total of 7 double crochets plus that first chain around the circle, and so that will give us 8 stitches around the circle. If this is still confusing for you, just please continue to watch this and feel free to stop at any time, rewind, and rewatch any part that you need. When you finish your 7th double crochet, you're going to connect that loop that's on your fingers to the top part of that first chain that we made, and you're going to use a slip stitch to do it. So once you make your slip stitch, you can grab your scissors, trim your yarn, and then gently pull on that yarn to tighten it up. Now you can grab your yarn and do the same steps again so that you have 2 rounds that are the same. And once you have those, it's time to move on to our next color. So you're going to find a stitch just a couple over from the knot on your center round, and you're going to put your new yarn color underneath that stitch and tie a knot to secure it. Then make a slip stitch under those same 2 strands and chain 2. For this round, we're going to do 8 puff stitches around, and for this first one, we're going to do a half double crochet. So you get the 3 strands on your fingers, and then you're going to pull a new loop all the way through all 3 of those, and then chain 1. So for this next one, for the puff stitch, you're going to wrap the yarn around your fingers, go under that next stitch from the first round so that you have 3 loops on your fingers. Then you're going to wrap around, go under again, pull a new loop up so that you have 5. Now you're going to pull the yarn through all 5 of these strands and then chain 1. And this is how you'll do the remaining 6 puff stitches. I'm going to show you one more time before moving ahead to the next round, but feel free to stop, rewind, and rewatch this as many times as you need. And remember, between each puff stitch to chain 1. This will ensure that your round doesn't get too tight. Once you get to your 8th puff stitch, you're going to chain 1 again, and then you're going to lay that last loop on top of the top part of that first chain that you made and do a slip stitch to connect it. Then grab your scissors, trim your yarn, and gently pull the end of your yarn snug. And now it's time to repeat these steps with your second round. Once you have 2 rounds that look the same, it's time to move on to our third and final color. This will be our border. We first need to attach our yarn the same way by going in between a puff stitch and underneath that top stitch, and we're just going to tie a knot to secure it. You'll want to go kind of right in the center of this stitch, as we'll be making new stitches on both sides of this knot. As with our previous rounds, we're going to get started with a slip stitch and then chain 2. For reference, we are starting with one of the corners of our granny square. We will be making half of it now and then half of it when we make our way around. Now we're going to make a double crochet stitch into the same gap that we made our chain. Then chain 1, and now we're going to do 2 half double crochets. So you're going to wrap the yarn around your fingers so you have the 2 loops, and then go in between those next puff stitches, grab a third loop, and then pull a new loop through all 3 of those. So that's 1 half double crochet, and now I'm doing a second one. So you have the 3 strands on your fingers and then pull a new loop all the way through. Then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next gap. So you're going to go in between those next 2 puff stitches underneath that top stitch. After the 2 double crochets, you're going to chain 1, and for reference, we're now on the second corner. So I'm doing that chain 1, and then we're going to do the second side. So we're going to repeat these steps again. So right now I'm going to do 2 double crochets into the same hole that the other ones were in. So it might feel a bit crowded, but it should fit, and this will make our first full corner. So after those 2 double crochets, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to go back to doing 2 half double crochets, just like we did on the other side. So basically the pattern is making a corner, doing the 2 half double crochets, and then making another corner. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go into my next corner by doing the 2 double crochets. And now I'm going to skip ahead to the final corner to show you how we finish off our square. Once you get to the final corner, we're just going to finish it off the same way we did the other corners, with 2 double crochets. So you're just going to go into that same gap that you started and do the 2 double crochets. Then chain 1, and you're going to connect this the same way you have in the other rounds to the top part of that first chain that we made. So you make a slip stitch through those, and then grab your scissors, trim your yarn, and pull it snug. Now before I move on to my next square, I'm going to flip this one over and finish off all those loose tail ends. So the areas where you've already knotted your yarn, you can just trim those really close, and if you have any extra ones that you need to knot, then you can do that too. So basically follow the same steps again to make your second square so that you have 2 identical matching ones. And now it's time to connect our 2 squares into a bag. So grab whatever color yarn you want to use. I'm going to use this white because I want a little bit of contrast with the stitching and connecting. And I'm going to measure around the bag about 3 times. This doesn't have to be exact. If it's a little bit less, that's fine. If you think that you want to use this strand in your handle in any way, then I would say maybe give yourself a little bit more, but you can always add more yarn if you need. And if it gets too long, it's kind of cumbersome to pull through. So once you have that cut, then we're going to take your 2 squares and you're going to lay them back to back. So you want both of the unfinished sides facing each other and then the finished sides pointing out, because this will be the final look of your handbag. Try to line the stitches up on both of your squares. I like to start in the corner, finding that corner stitch, and we're going to weave our new yarn, so my white yarn, through the back part of each of the stitches on both of the squares. If you know another stitch that you prefer and want to use, you're welcome to do so, but this is just a really simple way to get those two squares together. So you can see I've gone through the first two stitches and then now I'm going through the ones right next to it. So you're basically going to weave back and forth all the way along the side of the square. And just do the best you can to keep these lined up because you don't want to get to the end of a side and be missing too many stitches. But the nice thing about chenille yarn and hand crochet in general is that it's pretty forgiving. So as long as you are close, then it should look fine. So you can see I got my first side done and now I'm going to go around this next corner and then work up the other side. So we're going to continue this way until you have 3 sides complete. And fast forward to that, you can see how the bag has come together. Open it up, make sure that it looks the way that you want it to. And now we're going to figure out our handles. So as you can see, if you pull up the extra yarn on both sides, I have made one before where I just knot the top of that. So that's very simple. But today I'm going to do a chain instead, just to give a little bit more stability to my bag. So I'm going to put a loop through the top 2 stitches and then I'm just going to chain until I'm out of yarn. So we just pull the loop through, and I like to make these a little on the tighter side just because they're going to get pulled on more than the other parts of the bag. And as you can see, I'm actually running out of this sage color yarn. So I am going to change my plan and actually do it differently. So I could have a really short handle, but I want a little bit longer one. So I'm gonna undo this chain and start over. And I'm actually going to use the white color as the main part of my chain, but I still want to incorporate this sage color. So I'm gonna loop it through at that top corner and just make a knot there to secure it. And then I'm going to actually use the white color to chain around that sage color. So I'm going to do the chain the same way and just kind of crisscross that sage color back and forth as I go. As you can see, there are multiple ways to do this, and it really just depends on the final look that you want for your bag. I find that 18 to 20 chain is pretty good for like an over-the-shoulder bag, but if you want it to be a crossbody, obviously do more than that, and you can really make it whatever length you want. So then you're going to find the corner stitches on the opposite side, and I pulled some of my yarn through those corners and then also the final loop on the chain, and then trim that yarn, and then you're going to weave it back into the bag to just make sure that it's secure. So I did this a couple times just to make sure it wasn't only one strand holding it in place, and then you can knot the ends of your yarn together and then trim off the excess on the ends. The main thing with the handle is that it is secure enough and also that the ends are just tucked in so that it looks nice and finished. So when you're done with this side, you can go over to the other side of the handle. And I just tucked this tail yarn through to the inside and knotted it and then trimmed off the excess. And there you have it, your very own Granny Square handbag. I'm so glad you joined me for this project, and I hope you love your bag so much. You can find yarn, tutorials, and more inspiration on my website at staycozyco.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you continue to stay creative.